What is up, Bills Mafia? Welcome to a special Tuesday edition of Shout, a Buffalo Bills football podcast. He's Ryan Talbot. I'm Matt Parrino. And we had ourselves a little OTAs practice today, Ryan. A lot to get into. My observations column is live now. You can read it over at syracuse.com, newyorkupstate.com. It is chock full, 1,200 words of everything that happened out at One Bills Drive today. Ryan, it's going to be fun to get into this here, and we have a lot to cover. But before we do, I wanted to talk a little bit about our event that we had on Saturday night, and it was another really special one, and we haven't had a show since. There were folks from South Carolina, New Hampshire, Rochester, Syracuse that kind of made the drive in, and it was just such a super special night, and I know that you enjoyed it.
Oh, great time. First thing we get there, we're talking with Ed and Alicia, and someone comes up to me and he introduces himself, Jeff, and he's like, I'm from South Carolina. I was driving to Buffalo, something with his family, and he goes, I heard on the podcast as I was driving in that you guys would be at Wingnuts. I had to be there. And then oddly enough, I'm outside because you were just about there at that time, and it was going to help you bring things in. Two other people come up, introduce themselves, also from South Carolina. The first three people I meet that night are in from South Carolina to come see a Shout podcast. So really cool. And like you said, Rochester, Buffalo, obviously, Syracuse, all the places near us as well. Just always a great turnout. Can't say enough good things about the Bills Mafia and the support that they give us.
I met Paul and Ed. We met all of the fans, but I was having a conversation with Paul and Ed. Paul is from New Hampshire. Ed lives locally here in town. They're really good buddies. Paul was in from New Hampshire, and they went to Porch Fest over the weekend, where all the bands play on their front porches, and you go to house, and they met for the event, and they were talking. And when it was getting close to being over, Ed was like, "What are you doing later?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to Wingnuts. I listened to this Bill show, and they're having an event there." He goes, "Shout." And Paul's like, "Yeah, Shout." And he's like, "I listen to Shout. You're going to Wing. I want to go." So they both came out to Wingnuts. They didn't even know that each other listened to the show and were fans. It was super awesome. And then actually, Paul told me that he grew up on the street that I live on now, in Amherst, which was totally Buffalo story, right? These events are just awesome. Our next one is on the calendar, June 23rd. It's a Friday night. Mark your calendar now. If you want more details, there's a link in the description on YouTube, over on all the audio platforms. And what it'll do is it'll take you to the event page on Facebook. You can RSVP, so you get kind of a reminder and kind of can keep it in your calendar. But even if not, put it in your calendar right now. Friday, June 23rd at Wingnuts, 700 Military Road, Ryan.
Yeah, can't wait for our next event. Looking forward, Friday night show, so that should be a good time.
All right, here we go. Let's get into the nitty gritty. A lot to cover. Where do you want to get started from today's practice, Ryan? Because there's a lot of juicy stuff happening out in Orchard Park.
Well, let's start with your lead and talk a little bit about some guys that ended up impressing Von Miller and Josh Allen today.
Yeah, so GM Von, who's kind of, going to be in kind of that role for the next couple of months here as he continues the rehab process. And I guess to start off with, quick update on Von Miller. He is starting to do some defensive line work, some pass rush stuff in cleats, slower speed, not full go yet. But he said he guarantees that he will be back before week 6, which I think is quite a bit of an update. But he was out of practice today. He was watching the offense. He was watching the defense. He named a player from both sides, and they're both kind of younger guys. Jamarcus Ingram on defense, and I agree with his assessments. I thought he was really good today. And then Justin Shorter on the offensive side of things. And it's interesting because one person that we're going to talk about a little bit later, and I think is one of the biggest takeaways I had from practice today. He gave Justin Shorter the business a few times, just welcome to the NFL kind of moments. But overall, Shorter kind of flashed that explosiveness, which I think stood out to Von Miller. The size profile, the physicality, the speed, his kind of giddy up once he gets going. It was on display today.
Yeah, so first of all, with Von Miller, the guarantee back by week 6. He knows his body. He knows what he's going through. I always have those thoughts of, the team has to clear you first. So you just never know for sure. But I like that he's feeling so good at this point. It's a promising sign for the Bills. Didn't rule out return even in week 1. So at least it sounds all encouraging right now. He's gone through this process before. It's not like he has to kind of learn on the fly in terms of, how his body feels in terms of making certain moves, doing certain things. So it's certainly realistic and possible. As for the players you mentioned, Ingram, I believe this is his second year in Buffalo. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
Coming out of UB,
And his coach was there. His former UB coach, Marquise Linguist,
oh,
was in attendance watching practice. So a cool day for him.
that's awesome. Having the former coach there, having a nice day like that. And, listen, the Bills are pretty deep in their secondary, cornerback, safety. But things like this, you're making a great impression. You're making a case already to say, hey, if there's that one final roster spot, I'm going to go out and try to earn that. Or worst case scenario, priority, practice squad type of player. So really cool to hear that about Ingram. Obviously, from year 1 to year 2, the ins and outs of the system more. You can kind of train your body a little bit more for the NFL game, where going from college to the pros, it's a little bit different in terms of that time span. Justin Shorter, I mean, he has the NFL physique. He kind of looks like he's that chiseled veteran. So not shocked that he showed off that explosiveness at times. Looking forward, though, to talking a little bit about the player that kind of gave him the business, as you put it.
Before we get to him, Ingram, I wanted to mention, Von Miller walked up to him after practice and said, "Man, you had a good day out there." And Jamarcus Ingram looked back at me and was like, "What? I didn't have a good day." And, there was one, play where it was probably, if it wasn't for another catch, and we'll talk about that later in the show, it might have been the catch of the day, but Keyshawn Johnson, number 81, get used to his name. I remember him from last year just being ultra competitive. Seeing him in different settings during practice. He made a really, really good play. And I thought Ingram, it was a good throw from Kyle Allen. It was a tough catch, even though it was a good throw. And I thought Ingram played the route perfectly. He was step for step with them. It was sticky coverage. You could only be so physical. They're not allowed to touch each other. They're not in pads. And that's why everything that we talk about in these shows, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But I thought it was great coverage. It was just a really nice play by the receiver. And, a lot of names, we talked about it back at rookie mini camp, Shavers, the UDFA, Tyrell Shavers. He had a really nice day. I thought Keyshawn had a really nice day today.
Keyshawn Johnson, throw me the damn ball. All right, different Keyshawn Johnson, but still another young guy kind of in the mix here for practice squad opportunities, or even, there's always that one or two players that catch us off guard come training camp and make their case for end of the roster spot. So you just never know. So good to see some of these younger players really stepping up, though, early on here in OTAs.
The Bills have a very, very interesting potential problem on their hands, Ryan. Tre'Davious White is coming back into, he obviously played on the back half of last year, kind of ramping things up. I thought he had a couple of really good performances, and the expectation is he takes another step towards what he was before the injury. You got him at CB1. After that, man, it is a coin toss. Like, you got Dane Jackson, who the Bills still love, Kyer Elam, who they spent a first-round draft pick on, and then Christian Benford. All three of them, according to John Butler today, are in that competition for CB2, which is crazy to think about, Ryan, because can you envision a world where we live in come September if Kyer Elam isn't implanted as that CB2? I mean, there's serious questions are going to start popping up. And here's why I'm starting to foreshadow that a little bit, because Benford was awesome today. I mean, I wrote it in my notes a couple times. He plays like a bully. And it's like he's got that mentality. Whenever you talk to somebody who talks about him on the team, that's the sense that you take away from him. And Butler was talking about his competitiveness, his football IQ, his work ethic, all those little things. Justin Shorter is a man. I mean, he is a man among boys at times, looking out there. He's a huge dude. And Christian Benford just had no time for it. I mean, the juice was on display. He was competitive. He was as physical as you can be in this setting. And he just ripped a ball away from Justin Shorter on what should have been a catch. I thought it was kind of not a great throw, but stride for stride, move for move. Christian Benford competes his butt off every single moment. How much of a problem could this potentially be for the Bills if he somehow ends up winning this job and it's White and Benford and Elam is just left on the outside looking in or in another type of rotational role? And then you have Dane Jackson. What do you do?
I mean, it's a good problem to have if it ends up coming out that way. In the NFL, having depth, having talent at cornerback is so important because you're just one play away from needing that next man up. But, Benford, it's really encouraging to hear about his day today because year one as a rookie, obviously greatly exceeded all expectations out there on the field. Early made some really nice plays. His knowledge of the zone defense coming out of college obviously gave him that leg up on Elam and helped him get on the field quickly. But you mentioned the work ethic, the competitiveness, the training that he went through this offseason. And, one day, but it's paying off for him. It shows off that he's, ready to kind of take that next step in his game too. So you're right. It creates a problem because you drafted, Kaiir Elam in the first round last year. And the expectation is you want to get him on the field. And to Elam's credit, whenever he was on the field last year, he seemed to be making plays. Interception against Mahomes in the end zone, passes defense, good coverage. He was solid when he was out there. So it's not like he played poorly, but if he gets beaten again by Benford, yes, I get from especially like the national view, how that could be seen as a problem. And then Dane Jackson, Mr. Reliable, he's going to be in the right spot, the right position. He's not the most athletically gifted cornerback on this team, but he's also not going to get beaten for double moves for these big gains. And the team likes players like that because you keep the ball in front of you, you can make a play on the ball, you can get off the field.
Let's stay in the defensive backs room. Jordan Poyer was in attendance today. Attendance, by the way, the only people that I didn't see out there were Stefon Diggs. We'll get to that in a few. Latavius Murray and Matt Milano. These are voluntary workouts. All three of those guys are, veterans, been in the league 7+ years. Latavius Murray, I mean, he's 33 years old. He was on the verge of maybe not even playing football. So I don't think that he's in a super rush to get back. I wasn't super shocked to not see him there, but pretty good attendance. Otherwise, some guys that were there that weren't participating, kind of just off to the side. Jordan Poyer, he was doing some bike work. He was in street clothes. Jordan Phillips looked like he was working through something, was working with the trainers a little bit. He wasn't in uniform either. Then obviously Von Miller and Mitch Morse as well. Those were the four that were there, but that weren't participating. So Jordan Poyer out, huge opportunity for Taylor Rapp to make his first impression with the Bills. And man, our guys are already raving about this dude. And, it's interesting. We went back and when we were talking about the potential fits for the Bills to replace Jordan Poyer, had he left in free agency, Rapp never felt like a viable option because I thought he was going to make too much money somewhere. I thought somebody was going to give him a really good deal, a multi-year deal. He comes in and he takes the vet minimum to play with the Bills in a situation that places him in a backup role, in a utility role, if you will. But I think the thinking is like, okay, you're probably going to get on the field at some point. There, whether it be by like trying to just fit him in somewhere in Sean McDermott's defense, or if one of the starting safeties go down. Neither Poyer or Hyde played every game last year. And I thought, it was perfectly fitting that he made his presence felt from the very jump. It was a really nice ball from Josh Allen. By the way, side clip here, Josh Allen, really crisp today. They weren't in pads. It's pretty easy to play in this kind of environment, but you want the guy to look like Josh Allen, and he looked like that. A couple of just unbelievable throws. One that was on a rope. This one in particular, nice throw to Deontay Hardy, who had some action today. He was pretty active throughout the day. Taylor Rapp comes in. He reacts to the play, gets involved, rips the ball off, out, PBU. Really nice start for Taylor Rapp.
You mentioned it, first of all, Rapp with the projection. I think he was projected to make around $9 million on like Spotrac and things like that, or $8 to $9 million per season. And obviously it didn't come to that. He got a lot less with the Bills. But for Rapp, it makes a lot of sense. It's a 1-year audition. The Bills do have an aging safety room, and if he comes in and he makes an impact in year one, he's going to most likely sign a long-term deal with the Bills, maybe in season, maybe after the season. And he's on a Super Bowl contender. But the other thing you mentioned, Matt, is if he is as good as he looks now and he continues that all off season, the Bills are going to find ways to get the safeties on the field, all three of them. You can move one up into like a linebacker spot, playing like a hybrid type role on certain downs, especially obvious passing downs. And you can play him, move him, rotate him around. But to get a guy like Rapp in this system, a guy that has a ton of starting experience, has a lot of athleticism, checks a lot of the boxes of what the Bills like in safeties, that was a great value signing. They're just very deep. Like I said about corner, they're just as deep now at safety. You mentioned the top three there. There's DeMar Hamlin in the mix. They re-signed Dean Marlowe. They have some other young guys in the room and some other veterans. So it's a good problem to have here in OTAs and to watch these guys battle it out and maybe create good problems for Sean McDermott in terms of how do I get all these guys on the field in meaningful games.
The one good thing about tuning into the podcast is you're going to get a little bit more of a dive than you will in the articles or the social media coverage. One thing today too was I thought Dorian Williams, I tried to pick him out when I saw him on the field a little bit more today. And there was one play where Damian Harris caught a ball out of the backfield, real quick, bang, bang play. And Harris came shooting down, the gap there and down on the running back. And he was on him in an instant. And you're like, oh, well, okay. There's that like closing speed that, Brandon Beane talks so much about when they drafted him, which is interesting. The big announcement this morning from Sean McDermott, though, Ryan, came that Dorian Williams has been working at middle linebacker. So there's no wait. There's no learning curve. This is like, we were talking about this as recently as a couple of days ago, like what could be the path to this for him? He is starting day one as a middle linebacker, and I think right in the mix to be that starter, depending on how he does this summer.
You have to wonder if Brandon Beane wanted to throw the media off the scent a little bit after they drafted him, because right after they drafted Dorian Williams, they said, we're going to start him out at outside linebacker. He'll play some special teams. But I'm sure in his mind, he said he has the size, the athleticism of some of these other really, really good middle linebackers in this league. And it's all about adapting to the playbook, picking things up. Now, we just talked about this recently. I think Dorian Williams has the talent to be this team's starting middle linebacker, the athleticism, the closing speed, the ability to shed blocks. It's going to come down to knowing the playbook, the ins and outs of it, because obviously that spot on the defense is generally the one that's your signal caller, that's making sure everyone's lined up in the proper spot. So if they start out with one of these veterans that they currently have on their roster, Dodson, AJ Klein, whomever it may be, it wouldn't stun me. But if they hand over the reins early on in the season, quarter of the way through, for instance, I could see that being maybe the path for Williams to really then being able to make an impact for this team.
Yeah, I saw Benford out there quite a bit. I can't. The struggle is I can't really talk about what he was doing, where he was lined up, those kinds of things. There's restrictions on what we can report. I can say that he looked fast, like, which is something to note, because that's kind of where he got dinged a little bit last year, right? Like, was that lack of super quickness? Like, the game seemed to be really too fast for him still, and it felt like he was much more comfortable. We'll obviously get a better look at him over the course of the spring and then into the summer. But yeah, I think all across the board, it's going to be a fun competition to watch on the inside at linebacker. Let's stay on the defense, and then we'll push things over to the offensive side. Boogie Basham with a sack today. It wasn't anything super tremendous. It was a one-on-one win against Ryan Vandemark. Really nice outside pass rush move. He lands and sacks. I believe it was Kyle Allen. It might have been Matt Barkley. I can't remember now. It's in the story. Go read it. But a nice play from Boogie Basham. Von Miller, made it a point to say, because I asked him, what's the biggest difference between Boogie and AJ last year to this year? And he was quick to say, first of all, they both got bigger. You could see that in their size. So like the stuff that was in my story a couple months ago, like the work is paid off. I mean, Boogie is starting to kind of, find the body, the NFL prototype body that he was searching for. And I think that puts him in a good position to take a run at a more productive role on this defense. He flashed at times in camp last year. Like, we're not overreacting to the stack, but he had one, and I wanted to mention it. Ed Oliver was, we're talking about a horse of a different color. Okay. Like, this dude looks like, I'm sorry for the horse reference. It was too easy. He just looks like a level above. like not only like the linemen, but just the rest of the players in the defensive line. I mean, just he was flying around out there. He looks healthy. He looks explosive. I mean, at times it just looked like there was one rep that I wrote about specifically where he flies through a gap between David Edwards and Ryan Bates, and you're like, whoa, like they're backpedaling. They didn't even have a chance to like set and get a hand on him. He made one quick move. The get off was there. He was in the defensive backfield, and it was such a great play. He got his hands up. Josh Allen tried to get rid of the ball. It was incomplete pass to Deontay Hardy. And then in another move, or that was a rep against Osiris Torrance where he had the incomplete move. The move against Edwards and Bates, he actually batted down the ball. So, like, it was a huge day for Ed Oliver. Again, not in pads, but you like to see it.
You love to see it. And, you know, when it comes to Ed Oliver, this doesn't mean that he wasn't trying before, but there is something, Matt, about players in a contract year that are looking to get the bag, so to speak, that are looking for that big deal. And they practice, you know, they flash in practice, they flash on the field in the regular season, and then they line themselves up for a nice payday, whether it's with their current team or another team. And it wouldn't shock me at all if Ed Oliver continues to flash like this throughout the OTAs, mini camp, training camp, preseason, regular season, etc., because this is such a pivotal year for him. And we've seen those flashes. We've seen him dominate games, take over at times. So I have really high expectations for Oliver this year. Nice to see him get off to a good start. Same with Boogie Basham. You mentioned it. You know, you had a great piece on him this offseason and how he knows this is a make or break year. Getting a sack on day, the first day of OTAs that the media is attending is always an encouraging sign. Epinesa, a little off topic. The pictures of him at the golf tournament in Rochester this past week, he looked physically, maybe not larger, but I don't know. He just looked a little bit different than he had before. And you can almost see that little gleam in Brandon Beane's eye as he's shaking his hand in one of those photos. Like, okay, he's kind of has that NFL prototypical body now. And maybe this group will be able to make an impact, whether Von Miller's out there for those first few weeks or not.
Make some hay. They'll be able to
make some hay. I like that.
We are just,
you've been working with me too long.
I know. They're just coming like candy right now. I can't even stop them. All right. If you're watching on YouTube, over 200, thank you so much for spending your early Tuesday evening with us. And I hope that you get us locked into your calendar, your schedule every Tuesday for the next couple of weeks. We're going to have 2 more OTAs, reaction shows, observation shows, and then we'll obviously have the mandatory minicamp episodes as well. Usually they do the 2 days. I know it's a 3-day mandatory minicamp. Historically, Sean McDermott lets them go a day early. We'll see. Maybe that changes with him now in the defensive coordinator role. Mark asked, what about us on Facebook? Mark, you're right. I do not spend enough time saying thank you for watching us on our Facebook stream. Hit that like button on Facebook. Smash it on YouTube. Subscribe to the show as well. We really appreciate it. Ryan, big landmark for us recently. We just went over 2 million views on this channel on YouTube. That's absolutely massive. We've done a little bit over 300 videos. We're now over 2 million views. That's basically all the podcasts. We created this channel after starting it on the New York Upstate Maine account years ago, and we started it from scratch. The support that we've had from everybody on this YouTube channel has been outstanding. You continue to watch, continue to like, subscribe. We actually have a part of our coverage that's going to change here in the show is going to stay pretty much the same, but it's going to be enhanced. And we're working on something that we're going to unveil in July. We're really excited about. So stay tuned for that. Can't give too many details on it yet, but we're about to take it to a whole nother level. Get ready. I'm so pumped for everybody.
Pumped for that. Pumped that over 2 million people watching our videos on YouTube. And yeah, you mentioned it recently. I saw we went over 300 videos. So, one of those things that we're just churning out so much of these episodes and content that we don't even realize when it's a big episode like that at the time until after the fact. But yeah, Bills Mafia, thank you for your consistent support. It really does mean the world to Matt and myself.
Let's get to the offense. I mentioned earlier that Josh Allen looked really good today. And I mean, he was spreading the ball around. I mean, there was one deep ball that he had Dawson Knox on. And it was actually, let me bring up my notes here. It was actually like really good coverage on the play. And I mentioned Terrell Bernard. Terrell Bernard was in one-on-one coverage with Dawson Knox, streaking up the seam. And he stayed with him stride for stride. Knox probably should have made the play, but he had to kind of move his body a little bit of a weird way. And because of that just split second, I think it made it too tough of a play and it kind of bounced off his extended hand. If he runs straight through it, it's probably a big time play and a catch, but it falls incomplete. So that was a really nice play. Hardy heavily involved. The running backs heavily involved in the pass game. I mentioned Harris had a catch. It was Knox. No targets for Dalton Kincaid, which was a little bit surprising. Trent Sherfield, we're going to talk in a minute. Gabe Davis was with the catch of the day, Ryan. This one, let me talk you through this one because if the Bills haven't put out a highlight of this yet, I'm shocked because it was special. And I wrote in my headline for this section, a Gabe Davis special, a signature move, because this is the kind of plays that this dude can make at his highest level and why I think people should remain super high on Gabe Davis going into this year. And I really like the collection of talent that they have now in this pass catching room. I'd include Knox and Kincaid in that conversation. So he's one-on-one with Tre'Davious White, really good coverage. Allen sees him break out wide towards the sideline and just puts a bullet on both guys. And it's kind of like, and either one of them could have made a play at the ball. And what had happened was Davis kind of got away from the ball pretty quickly because he was kind of running fast out of his break. And all of a sudden the ball's behind him. He literally has to stick out his left hand. The ball's like behind him. He's running towards the sideline. He's got to stick out his left hand and literally stick the ball out of the air. And it does. It sticks right to his hand. He pulls it into his body. Of course, Gabe Davis gets both feet in at the sideline. Makes this unbelievable catch. Signature Gabe Davis. There you have it.
Yeah, that's the play that maybe we take for granted at this point. We saw it a lot his rookie year. That Colts game in the playoff always sticks in my mind where the Bills offense was struggling. It was Gabe Davis that made a few toe taps along the sidelines to get that team going then. He's done it so many times already in his career. So I like that term, the Gabe Davis special. Looking forward to seeing hopefully a lot of that this year. And that the ankle, woes that he dealt with last year in the past.
All right, let's go to Trent Sherfield. I want to talk a little bit
Yes.
about him today because huge praise from quarterback Josh Allen. And so the connection there is right before the Bills signed Sherfield, Christian Kirk, who's good buddies with Josh Allen, gave Allen his number, Sherfield's number. They play together in Arizona. And so Allen reached out, and let me just find this real quick so I can read you the quote. Here we go. So I asked Josh about Stefon Diggs not being there and if that maybe gave an opportunity to other people. And he said, this is a direct quote. You talk about other reps, Trent Sherfield getting a lot of the Z reps and learning this offense. I've loved what I've seen from Trent so far. The dude works extremely hard. He's one of the hardest working guys on the team, which honestly, that's big praise from Josh Allen right there on day 2 of OTAs. This guy just got into the building and he's already made this kind of impression. I thought that was something that made my eyebrows go up a little bit. Doesn't complain about anything. He's rolling right now. And I don't know if he would have gotten those reps without Steph. And obviously this is voluntary. We'd love to have Steph here. I'd love to have him here. I understand that OTAs aren't for everybody. And again, it is voluntary at the end of the day, but some of the guys are getting a lot of good work and maybe we wouldn't have gotten that if he is here right now. So I know those guys aren't taking that for granted. Trent Sherfield, one-on-one with Trey White on one play, makes a really good contested catch. I thought Trey White again had really good coverage. Throw from Josh Allen. It's good, but man, really good news, I think, on the Trent Sherfield front.
Yeah, and when it comes to Stefon Diggs, obviously Josh Allen's rapport and chemistry with him is well known. It's not something that they necessarily need to be working together here in OTAs. Like Josh said, if Stefon was there, it'd be great. But no, it's allowing a guy like Trent Sherfield to come in here and get those valuable reps. And his career has been really interesting. There was that piece. I want to say it might have been a Ty Dunn piece where he was in Arizona. He had a really strong summer, and even one of his wide receivers coaches said, hey, you should really be playing for us and on the field, but we got to go with like this rookie that was in front of you. He goes to the 49ers. Again, he gets a little bit better. He establishes himself on special teams. And then he's in Miami. And last year in Miami, when he was given opportunities in the offense, he really did have some bright moments and bright spots, especially one against his former team, the 49ers, where he caught the ball first play of the game across the middle, took it to the house for a score. He has the ability to be a difference maker, to make some key plays for this team. Obviously, not projecting him to be wide receiver 1 or 2 when you have Diggs and Davis, or even a top 4 target when you have some of these other guys on this team. But he can be a really valuable asset, in my opinion, Matt, where you can count on him in valuable situations and key spots to be on the field, to haul in catches, to move the chains. And that's really important to this team. So for them to get these reps early on, it's key. It's important. The more this chemistry develops with Allen and these newer receivers, the better it's going to be for the Bills offense.
Thank you for watching on YouTube. If you're watching there, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel as well. It really helps us out. If you're just popping in, we had another awesome Wing Nuts night last Saturday. The next one is on the calendar, June 23rd. Get it in your daily planner. There's a link in the description on YouTube and all the audio platforms that'll send you to the event page over on Facebook. Hit interested or going to that, and it'll give you a reminder as we get closer to the event. All right, I want to finish up here with the running backs. Obviously we saw a good amount of Cook. We saw some Harris. Thought we saw a lot of Nyheim Hines, and man, is he just like felt like Jekyll and Hyde with him today. And again, you don't want to overreact too much to these kinds of practice settings where it's like they're not in pads, but routes versus air, Hines has a drop, and so he goes back to the line with Allen after all the other receivers had gone down the field to kind of run it back the other way, and runs it again so he can get through the wrap and catch it. I didn't really think much about it. But then during team drills, he had a really untimely catch on a short pass again, and you're just like, all right, this can't develop into a thing because Nyheim Hines has an uphill battle. I wrote it. I mean, there's some people that think he's 4th on the depth chart right now. I mean, people are really high on Latavius Murray in this backfield. They went out and they signed Damian Harris for a purpose. And you figure, I think James Cook has the easiest path to RB1. So if that's the case, Nyheim Hines has a lot of work to do to carve out a role in this offense. And I feel like you want to be building trust with not only Josh Allen, but Ken Dorsey, who didn't feel comfortable calling your number almost at all last year. And so I'm more right about this now and talk about it now because this can't develop into a pattern for Hines as he tries to carve out some type of role for himself.
Yeah, this is something where he needs to kind of really turn things around in the OTAs, training camp, preseason, et cetera. You mentioned the Bills acquired him at the trade deadline or near the trade deadline, and something like 9 or 13 offensive snaps, was out there. Obviously, a very key special teams player or return man for this team, but didn't get involved in the offense. So now, after a full offseason, learning this playbook, learning the ins and outs of it, he's supposed to be counted on as someone that could maybe be a big play threat, catching the ball out of the backfield. So those drops you don't want to see here early on. And the Bills, like you said, went out of their way to add more weapons to this running back room. Obviously, you have James Cook in year 2. You bring in Damian Harris, who has had a lot of success when healthy with the New England Patriots. Latavius Murray, someone that's had over 500 yards, something like the last 7 or 8 years, is kind of like a rotational piece. So he's obviously a very solid player. So Hines really, if he wants to be a contributor on offense and not just a special teams guy, needs to have a really strong summer, and you want to see those drops get cleared up quickly.
Charles G asked, did we cover who lined up where along the interior O-line? We have not, because you're not allowed to do that. That's part of the Bills reporting guidelines, and most teams around the league have kind of adopted some variation of the reporting guidelines and these practices. They don't want people, the details of their situation getting out to other teams. And we in the media respect that. You can kind of, piece together some of it from watching the videos that they put out, so on and so forth. But I just think the point is they don't want various reports about specific position battles, especially at this point when we haven't really gotten to it today. A couple other notes I thought worth noting: Ike Butker, no knee brace, and he was
Mm.
scooting out there. I thought at times there was a play where I don't know if he was pulling or just running down at the end of a play, but he was moving really well, which I think is a good sign. You talk about Von Miller coming off of the injury, Trey White coming back more than a year removed from the injury. Ike Butker's in that same boat, and I feel like he looked really good. Mark's asking about Dalton Kincaid. Working a lot with Josh Allen during the early portion of practice. This was, their first practice open to the media, working together. They're kind of starting to develop that chemistry. No targets during the team portion, but I'd expect that to change. I don't think that's crazy. He was really spreading the ball around. A lot of guys got a lot of looks today.
Yeah, Kincaid. I'm sure the Bills will have videos of him and Allen making a connection here in the next few weeks before we know it. Working together on that chemistry now, nothing wrong with that. You already mentioned, you can't really talk about where players are, but like you said, a good thing to pay attention to are the videos that the Bills release and put out there. Great way to piece things together here early on, get an idea of what's going on at these practices that obviously, like you said, there are guidelines and things that we cannot report.
When he's gotten into the games over the years, it hasn't been like superstardom by any stretch. And at times, I mean, I think you could pick out plays where Saran Neal has struggled at times. But man, sometimes you watch him play, and I just feel like there's so much untapped potential in there. And maybe that's crazy talk. Maybe, I'm letting these practice settings, cloud my vision, because there have been games where I thought he's been in the game and it hasn't looked good at times. Now, there's also been moments like being matched up with Travis Kelce over the years. Like there's been times where I think he's had some good reps. He was awesome today. Saran Neal was all over the field. Had some really good plays behind the line of scrimmage. He had some really good plays in coverage. He's a really competitive dude. He brings a lot of energy, can do multiple things. Wanted to note that.
Yeah, Swiss Army knife for this defense, special teams contributor for the most part early on here, but he's flashed. Like you said, there were times where he was lined up against Kelce in the past where he's shut Kelce down on obviously just a handful of plays. We're not talking over the entire course of the game. There's a reason why Kelsey's going to end up being a first ballot Hall of Famer when all is said and done. But Neal has flashed that talent before, and he has the athleticism and the physicality and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do throughout the summer as well. One last thing on Butker, because you mentioned him too. This is someone that the Bills made a lot of moves on the interior of their line in free agency in the draft. This is someone, though, that has starting experience in Buffalo on the offensive line at guard. So it's just it's a good problem to have. They have so many guys that they probably have a lot of faith and trust in to help this line take the next step in year 2 of Aaron Kromer's system and improve from what they saw 1 year ago.
All right, I want to get out of here, Ryan. Before we do, I feel like we got to talk about DeAndre Hopkins part. What is this, 8 now?
18,
Is this part 8 of the offseason miniseries? You put up a story about it last night over at the site. He was on a podcast, mentioned Josh Allen as somebody that really gets him going about a potential fit if he were to go play for another team, which wasn't surprising to me. It's what I took away from it more, and I talked about this on the Danger Battaglia a little while ago. It's almost like, what's the word? It's almost like not in style right now to compliment Josh Allen, right? Like everybody's talking about Joe Burrow. Everybody's talking about Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson. Even I feel like people are trying to find a way to get super high on again. Josh Allen seems to be the guy that everybody wants to nationally, let's pipe down. Like we had the whole Jason Tatum, Colin Cowherd thing, which I don't want to get too much into this. We should talk about that at some point. It was a wild comparison. But DeAndre Hopkins, what is the path to him becoming a Bill for you? Because for me, I don't know if there'll be enough desire on the Bills and now with this roster at 90 to pull off a trade and give up future assets with they're like really asset rich right now going into next year's draft. And I don't know if they want to, part with any of those assets to get a guy that there might be the price tag probably comes down in season. Arizona probably takes on more of that contract in season and it becomes cheaper. What's the path here for you?
It would almost just have to be the Cardinals releasing him. I know it would be something like 22 million dead cap over those next 2 seasons if they did that. But even when you go to Spot Track, it kind of lists that as their potential out of this deal if they really wanted to, because he's due to make a little over 30 this year, cap hit wise, 26, I believe, next year. So it can free up some money for them. Trade wise, the Bills can obviously restructure, move deals around, send something. I just don't know if that's going to be the path that it would work out with. And yes, if the Cardinals were to release DeAndre Hopkins, he's available for every other team in the league, including the Kansas City Chiefs and some of these other Super Bowl contenders that would love a receiver like Hopkins. But you kind of mentioned it, Matt, the first quarterback out of his mouth in that I Am Athlete podcast of who you would like to catch balls from in the second stage of your career. Josh Allen, one of my favorite players since he's been in the league, called him a new age Andrew Luck, which is kind of funny to me because really Andrew Luck's really not that old. He just retired at a very young age and called it a career, but that's all good. And there's other organizations where it checked all the boxes too. But what Hopkins was saying in that interview, I want to join a team that has a stable front office. While Brandon Beane's been here since May of 2017, a lot of those guys in the front office have been here. Some are on their second stints in Buffalo because they went somewhere else. They come back. Some guys have left for other GM jobs like Joe Shane. But for the most part, obviously, very stable there. He wants to play for an elite quarterback. Well, he already was gushing about Josh Allen. He wants to be on a Super Bowl contender. The Bills check all of those boxes. So if he were to get released, I don't think the Bills would have to be the highest bidder. I think that they would just have to come in at a reasonable amount, and that would be enough for Hopkins to sign on the dotted line.
Over on YouTube, Bills are electric. That's the handle. McDermott during his press conference said DeMar was not practicing, but saw videos of DeMar practicing, ? That's correct. He wasn't practicing though. Like he was in a jersey and he was doing some of the workout stuff, like when they do like the side work, the individual stuff where there's no team element, there's no like physicality necessarily. Although I think he did hit, I saw him hit one what like the padded device. I don't know if that was the video. I don't want to speak on it because I didn't take the video. I wasn't over by the DBs. So we're able to go around the big circle now. And so I started at Allen and Kincaid, put out some videos of that, went over to Osiris Torrance, made it over to the D line, and I made it to the linebackers. By the time I got to the DBs, the video shooting portion of practice was over. So I'll have to start there next time. But yeah, definitely progress on the DeMar Hamlin front. But yeah, not fully participating in practice quite yet.
Yeah, so that's just kind of the terminology when McDermott uses that. He's talking about those 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s, team drill type deals. But like you said, what amazing progress that we've seen Hamlin from where from the event in January to where we are now. The fact that he's announced the comeback, he wants to play this year. He's putting himself in a position to compete for a depth role on this team. Just unbelievable stuff, even if he wasn't practicing out there today.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. A little over 40 minutes on a Tuesday evening. We'll be right back at you next Tuesday for our next edition of Camp OTAs observation show. Like and subscribe before you go. Go find us on all the audio platforms too, because you can, if you ever miss any parts of the live broadcast, you can always watch it back on YouTube, Twitter, or Facebook. But if you want it just in your, maybe put it on your headphones later on with just the audio only, you can find us on Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, all of the big podcast platforms. June 23rd, back at Wingnuts. Make sure you got it on your calendar. We'll see you then. Thank you for watching. For Ryan, I'm Matt. We'll see you next week.